with respect to the knowledge collection, testing, bodies of evidence out there that can be accessed. And so I really find myself in a place now of going back to the drawing board after 20 years and saying, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? We're going for it now. So to put together, a body of evidence that everybody, or most 99% of the people in the world, can agree on. You'll always have some doubters and whatever. That's just, especially with Pollock. Um, you're just trying to put all of that together. And the DNA thing is a huge question for us. And part of our process of being stonewalled and rebuffed and ignored or suppressed by the Pollock-Krasner Foundation, because we have attorneys' letters from over a decade saying, excuse me, you've allowed many other experts to go and sample the floor, photograph things, look for paint samples, look for DNA hair samples. Why are you excluding us? And so anyway, I really do find myself, unbelievably at this juncture of like, okay, well, what have we actually accomplished? What do we need to accomplish? We need to accomplish the authentication of the group as a whole and to bring them out, and more than attributed to Jackson Pollock. They deserve, or at least all the ones that, pass the test, they deserve to be recognized as original Jackson Pollocks and included in his life work, because many of these, getting back to the whole concept of, was this a hand pulled by Pollock, because the ages of these paintings range from early ones, meaning early drip pour, 45, 46, 47, well, even earlier than that, the very first stuff. In the catalog resume, there's something called the 1943. It was something about the galaxy, where you start to see a little bit of the drip pour, and then 46, 47 especially is, full on, here's this thing I'm doing. So, there are paintings in this overall group that are from early in the career, and then you can totally match up stuff with 49, 50, 51, 52. And then it's our contention that a lot of this collection is 52 to 56. And part of that story is the arrival of Clyfford-Still into the hood, as it is, the Springs, back in 1951. And this is a really interesting reference point. This is something you wouldn't have known before 2011. Clyfford-Still, unbeknownst to everybody except his wife, during his life only sold 6% of his work and kept over 2,000 pieces that, for the people that are familiar with it, that he left to the wife with the instructions, hey, if you go to a major city that will build me a gallery to my specifications, got to have skylights, can't have a cafeteria, can't show anybody else, whatever specific things he had. If they do that and build me a museum, I'll give them all the work. And so it was Atlanta and maybe Philadelphia and whatever, and Denver actually wound up winning. And there's an interesting correlation. I mentioned this in the only public lecture I've ever given on this at the LA Art Show back in 2020, February 7th. That there is an exact correlation with the arrival of Clyfford-Still, who was famous for thumping about, oh my God, forget, the galleries, forget the museums, forget the collectors. We paint because we're artists. We do this because that's who we are. It's what we do, And so there is, for the scholars, a real point there of, was it in fact Pollock drunk or just not painting 53 to 56? Or with the influence of Clyfford-Still, did he start to become much more selective about, hey, he's totally right. I'm painting this because I like painting. I'm, this is what I do. This is who I am. I don't, in fact, I'm on record as not being too happy with my gallery, reps and museums and the whole thing. So there is in my opinion, formed by 20 years, a real correlation. And I believe there are answers to be found there in the relationship between Clyfford-Still and Jackson Pollock, and the whole thing about saving, giving paintings away, etc. Jackson Pollock's first, serious rep, Peggy Guggenheim, their contract from 43 to 47, I think it was $1,500 a year. And the contract said, got every finished painting that Pollock did in a year, with the exception of one that he could pull. And to me, it was a very good explanation of why so much of Jackson Pollock's work is unsigned. Is that if you have a contract with Peggy Guggenheim that says she gets every finished painting that you do in a year, it's pretty easy to just go, well, I'm still working on it. I haven't signed it. I mean, I pull these up after 6 months. Maybe I want to add a few more squiggles, whatever. So anyway, that's another kind of aside about Pollock and his work, and how much of it is signed or unsigned. Um, but going back to the whole thing of, I'll keep saying that there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect with the standard story that's been told, that was told initially by Lee-Krasner, and now kind of is just like institutional memory, and what really happened in 53, 56. And so, you're definitely treading on sacred ground there. You're definitely, yeah, you're treading on, hallowed ground. And so, there's a tremendous amount of resistance. And but the odd thing is it's not in public. It's what's gone on behind the scenes for the last 20 years. That is, I don't know if you know Ronan Farrow, but maybe you'll listen, or maybe a friend knows. I think it would be a remarkable story and research project for him to check out, and or somebody like that, because as this comes to light, and in 2010, 2011, we had Harry Moses of 60 Minutes, fame, and his, being a legendary producer there, who became interested in this through one of the forensic scientists, who said, hey, Harry, you did that movie, What the Bleep is, who the bleep is Jackson Pollock for the one single painting. Well, this is that, like, times 100. And so we had the nice experience of having Harry come out several times to Lake Tahoe to look at stuff, to actually have a 1-hour interview with our source of all these paintings, and the guy who for 50 years had them, this Mr. Nemeth. That's never been seen. And it would be a really amazing thing, actually. I just thought to right now, hey, we should actually have some of that on this show. There's remarkable stuff that Harry, in a face-to-face, chair-to-chair, 1-hour filmed interview with Mr. Nemeth, who, same kind of thing, was very reticent to talk and appear on camera and all that kind of thing. So there's some awesome information there. And that's the type of thing that, Harry Moses was all set. He found $500,000 grant for this to be, filmed, and it was supposed to be with that Da Vinci La Bella Principessa, and it was supposed to be a half hour on La Bella Principessa and half hour on our thing of, like, here, art questions. And when the powers that be, and remember, this was Nova, PBS, and we even went to the National Geographic headquarters in DC and said, hey, got this project, are you interested in international distribution? And they, after about 5 minutes, were like, hell yes. And so it was one of a number of times when we saw the power of the political influence, the pull of the people, Eugene Thaw, Prince of Garner, associated with Pollock, where one day we had a $500,000 grant, and the next day it was like, oh, sorry, they pulled your money. And I'm like, Harry, what happened? He goes, I'm not really sure. I'm trying to find out an answer. I've never really had this happen before. And so, once again, a side discussion for a future podcast. But anyway, somebody that we have, 15 years. Once we did our first year and a half of research, because that's how our research process went, is that we heard about this in April and said, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. But then the more we started doing research over a year and a half, the more that the answers kept coming back. It's Pollock, it's Pollock, it's Pollock, it's Pollock. And we're like, dang. Okay. And so that's when we started to understand a fraction of the magnitude of this, and started interviewing and videoing with a professional cinematographer with the hopes of someday using it for a documentary or a movie or a PBS special or whatever. Footage. We have years of really amazing stuff that needs a really good editor and film person to put it together. And then you need a good, story writer, Ronan Farrow-ish, as far as doing like, expose, here's, controversial, blah, 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 whatever. And I just say his name because he did the Weinstein. And, as it's not for the faint of heart. I'll just, I'll tell you that right now. So.
You can look at it a couple of different ways. I mean, at some point, I'm sure folks would love to be able to monetize on the fact that these pieces are able to be authenticated, but from like an art historical perspective, right? If these really are by the person we think that you're making the case that I'm buying in, that if these really are by Pollock, they aren't just paintings by Jackson Pollock. They are some of the, if not the best paintings by Pollock. And it would be an injustice for his best work if the fact exists that these are by him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And, we had Steve Rubino, who's a famous attorney, and a guy named Rob DeBrouwer, who is actually a trustee on the board of State University, Stony Brook, who actually owns the Pollock-Krasner. I mean, the Jackson Pollock painting studio. They own it, and then the Pollock-Krasner Foundation, leases it or uses it or whatever. But they went and had a conversation with her, and she just said, "No, not interested." And they're like, "Aren't you interested in who these paintings are from? Because they certainly appear to be some of the best Pollocks, among the best Pollocks ever. And or if it wasn't Pollock, who was it?" And she was just totally shut them down. It's like, "Nope, not interested. We just, we've recused ourselves from authentication matters," which is a lame cop out. And that's just how we're doing stuff right now. And that was probably in 2014-ish, 15-ish. I can find out the exact time. But that was their just attitudes. Like, "Nope, sorry, we're not interested. We don't want to upset our version of the world. Our version of the Pollock world is flat, and you say it's this. No, we're just not interested." And so and they said, "Is that a responsible response for somebody who's, allegedly the flame keeper, the guardian per se of Pollock, the career and the body of work?" So it's a tough equation and question for everyone involved, which is why it's been easy for everybody to ignore it, sweep it under the rug, intentionally suppress it, what have you. And so, but now is time, and it was time 10 years ago. Like I said, if I understood that I would be where I am now today, 10 years ago, I would have been doing this 10 years ago. But I was very happy with the thing of like, I just want to be in the background. This really is a huge, remarkable collection. We've already done the couple $1 million of homework. It's, if it's not every single one of these paintings in this collection, then it is the vast majority of them. And that's just giving the nod to, you have to ask the question, were some of these like just slipped in, whatever. And it's like, fine, I'm, that's reality. Everything has to prove itself. But the Pollock-Krasner Foundation has definitely been about ignore and suppress. And they're in a no-win situation too, because it's like, well, for us to acknowledge that would mean that somehow we have to admit that at what point in time did we really know about this? And according to the forensic scientists that talk in closed door sessions with them, it's at least since the 70s. So it's a very difficult equation